Well, what we're living at the moment is a very clear situation where the demands of a growing world population are overwhelming the capacity that we have to provide resources. And that isn't going to change. We're heading from 7 to 9 billion people. There will be billions of people who want to develop their lives quite legitimately, and they will need resources. There's a growing middle class which will be roughly 2 billion bigger than it is today, eating differently, using materials, driving cars, and then we have in the West people living at a very high level of consumption. So we're in a situation where the demand for resources is going to keep escalating, and it's going to be very, very hard to meet it. Energy is only one example of this, where the pressure on energy supplies is going to be intense. The implications of it very quickly are, first of all, we're going to start running out of certain resources. Secondly, there will be a lot of tension and maybe even conflict over vital resources. And thirdly, the price is going to go up. And if I'm running a very poor developing country and energy is at $150 a barrel, I have trouble even running my agricultural system. So we are running into big trouble. What Rio+20 could do is a great deal about this. It could encourage the wealthy to start consuming less, which is politically difficult but ultimately inevitable. It could focus more on helping the poorest people to get to first base and have enough resources. But there is no slick, easy answer to this. And underlying all of the above is that our model of economic growth is incredibly inefficient in the way we use resources. The price mechanism in many cases simply doesn't function. And therefore we have to find a new strategy for economic growth, notably in the West and in the emerging economies, which is much more efficient in the use of resources. And that's possible. There are plenty of technologies available today, if only we had the wisdom to use them. I think the simple answer to that is our quality of life in the West is not all that great. We can buy everything we want, we can fill our house with 5 televisions. That is not making people happy. We do not have a model which is providing stability, as we see every day. We do not have a model which is providing employment. Millions of people are now out of work in the rich countries. So our model is not functioning very well. It is therefore perfectly possible to choose a different model, which is less based on stimulating demand for consumption, and people learn to get more out of their lives, not less, by living differently. So at the bottom of this whole pyramid is the question of our individual behavior, and we can do a lot to help this along. Well, as you say, they are discussing this. That's the problem. We've been discussing all of this now actually for 40 years and reasonably seriously for 20 years. The result of all these discussions has not been that much. We're still on the worst case scenario of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And if we carry on as we're going to warm the planet by around 6 degrees average in 50, 60, 70 years. That has devastating consequences for everybody. So while we are discussing all of this, the ground is shifting under our feet. So my message to these leaders in Rio is this is your last chance to get a grip of these problems, to find a new path of growth and cooperation which allows us to balance the needs of 9 billion people with the very, very fragile natural systems of the planet. If we don't get anywhere in Rio, I don't know where we will next meet and why we should do it. What would happen if we don't get serious action now is that nature will take its revenge on us, then we will panic, then there will be action, but it may very well be too late. So I think I would say to the Rio decision makers, in fact, you're living in a fool's paradise. The system is deteriorating faster than you will admit. This is probably your last chance to agree on concerted action to solve these problems. And I would add that the people who pay the highest price are the poorest people on the planet. For people like us in the West, we can survive. We can insulate ourselves from these problems, not forever, but for a while. but the people at the bottom of this, the 2 billion people living on less than $2 a day, they have very limited chance to adapt to this and even less chance to change the game. So the responsibility is heavily in the hands of the wealthy countries and the powerful emerging economies to change course before it's too late. Well, I've read in some of the literature that the battle for climate change will be won or lost in the cities, right? You have now around 50% of the world living in cities. By the end of this century, if we stay on the kind of course we're on now, it's going to be more like 80%. It means that cities are not marginal, they're central to the solution to these problems. City leaderships are usually more stable, more down to earth because they deal with their citizens in the streets every day, and they are accustomed to longer term planning. Most of our governments have lost that capacity. They don't think long term. They used to, but then they destroyed their capacity to think long term. So cities do. You have to think long term if you're investing in highways or treatment plants, whatever it may be. So the mayors of your cities are familiar with the need to look long term. They're familiar with the needs and concerns of their public, and they have a bit more stability to take longer term decisions. So I would say the role of cities and local authorities and communities is crucial, and by default of action at the international level, they have to get on with it. And I think that will be a powerful message from ICLEI in Belo Horizonte.